Of course, AI is the theme for all retailers right now. How are you using AI for consumer-facing experiences? How are you using AI to uplevel your own teams internally? How are you using it with partners, right? And so at the end of the day, enhancing it and finding the partners that can supplement certain aspects of that work only make it better. It's all about personalization. And it's kind of a win-win for everybody. That's how they meet their customers where they're at. It's still a challenge, and I don't know that there's anybody doing it perfectly today. I just recently got back from the Women in Retail Leadership on the Road event in Chicago. So for those of you who don't know, Women in Retail Leadership is it's a great organization. It's really built to kind of foster networking and support between women retail executives. I mean, executives is kind of a general term, but anybody that kind of works in the industry in kind of a leadership function. And so they do they do a summit, and then in the fall, they do these kind of short 1-day, half-day events. I was just at that event in Chicago and Evanston, and it was fantastic. My biggest takeaway, and of course, I will say I was also at Shop Talk Chicago in the fall as well. And so this was a theme everywhere. But of course, AI is the theme for all retailers right now. But it's kind of like when we think about when omnichannel was kind of coming online 15, 20 years ago, and omnichannel was a thing and e-commerce was a thing, people are starting to talk about it in generalities like that. And what I really found was that the way people are thinking about AI in retail varies so greatly organization to organization. And it's anywhere from how are you using AI for consumer-facing experiences? How are you using AI to uplevel your own, teams internally? How are you using it, for example, with partners, right? And so there was a lot of that theme around where to even start. But one of the themes that was interesting, because this is not a new thing, and I say this a lot of times to people that either don't come from the retail or e-commerce industry or just starting to learn about it, is that at the end of the day, retailers are not technologists, right? Like they are not technology companies. Even those that start as direct-to-consumer brands, they're merchants, right? They're there to sell products and connect with their consumers and build an experience. And so for partners and vendors like Signified and like others, it's really critical to build a strong relationship with these retailers because they know that they can't do certain things themselves, right? And that's really where I think retail is quite a different industry, and it's a different client for vendor partners to have, because they know their own shortcomings, right? They're like, we don't know how to do this. And one of the biggest things that I heard, I think it was the president of Duluth Trading was actually speaking, and she said this exact thing. And I've been, again, saying it for years. And it's like, find the right partners to supplement where you know that you just can't do those things, whether it's leveling up with AI, whether it's automating certain processes, whether it's, fixing your supply chain fulfillment strategy, whatever that is, and be okay with, using something like maybe off the shelf or out of the box versus constantly just kind of being in your own organization. And so really building that trust. So as vendors, I think the learning for me was building a strong foundation of trust and relationship first is really critical with these retailers, because they will come to you when they need something. I think it comes back to really meeting the customers where they are, right? And that we always say that, but I think the best retail tech partners and the best vendors do that in practice, right? Whether that's a crawl, walk, run approach, right? Whether that's suggesting that you phase out the work and reach a certain milestone before you kind of go on to the next thing, right? Really doing that kind of white glove hand holding that these retailers need. I think the other thing is, I don't think it's wrong that retailers want to explore building in-house, right? Like that's a proprietary need and want for any kind of growing business. And of course, very small direct-to-consumer brands, they're not going to build in-house, right? Like likely they're not, maybe just in a little way. But then as you scale up and you get into kind of the Nikes and the Lululemons of the world, of course, and the Targets, right? Like you expect those organizations are going to build some way in-house. I think the best vendor partners on that end of the scale are ones that come in and say, how do we help supplement and augment what you're doing? Because again, there are going to be areas of opportunity that those retailers just can't capture or overcome, right? So like we talk about our commerce network at Signified, that aperture is so much wider, right, than what a Nike or a Target can see, even though they could build a very good solution in-house. And so I think the way to frame it to them is that's not wrong. And you shouldn't walk away from that proprietary work because it's important, especially just within your organization, right? But enhancing it and finding the partners that can supplement certain aspects of that work only make it better. The other example that I'll give, and this is just from a prior life, is that and I started to hear this a little bit in the industry, but I still think very new, is this idea more on the operational side of like teams building like digital twins. And so the concept there is, hey, we do want to build a house and we want to build the models and we want to learn the things, right? We want to learn all the things, get all the feedback. But bringing in a vendor that we can also run parallel, right? And have a digital twin in the sense that the exact same type of integration, the exact same mapping, the exact same solution effectively, but that can also act as almost like a backstop, right? Like if the lights go out and it's like, we got to have a generator, almost think of it as like a generator, a backup generator. And so I've heard companies, I think actually Lenovo is one of them, that has started to really dip their toe into this concept of digital twins so that A, they're partnering with the right people, but B, they're still doing that important work internally. And it's kind of a win-win for everybody because the vendors get to be part of that ecosystem. The retailers win because they can do that work, but they have a lot less risk on their side. Having come from the retail industry and spent a lot of years there and worked with vendors, right? Brought on vendors, like I rolled out a allocation and planning solution when I was at Ann Taylor. And so I have been in that seat. And I think the number one thing is to speak in the language of the retailer, of the business, right? So even if you've got a fraud prevention solution, you've got a post-purchase solution, you're a e-commerce platform, those are all great things. And they're all things that these retailers need in their operations. But if you can't speak to them and convey it in a way that is in business language, meaning retail business language, right? And that encompasses e-commerce, of course. Then it's really hard to build that trust and make that connection. I think what the other thing is retailers are looking for their vendor partners to already know their business in the industry, but be that thought leader that can add, again, that like extra layer on top that they just frankly don't have. They don't have the visibility or, again, that kind of wide net that like a vendor has to see kind of around corners and things like that. And so I think the thought leadership piece, I believe, is becoming more and more critical for retailers as they evaluate and assess vendors, right? Because they're still in competition with their other retail, colleagues, right? Their cohorts. And so they always want to be a couple of steps ahead. It's really hard to do that when your job is to be a merchant, right? Like you want to understand the broader landscape, but you do need a partner that is kind of going to be like your ears and eyes, right, in the industry. And so again, partners that are constantly kind of pushing that envelope forward and pushing the innovation forward and acting as those thought partners and bringing that information back to the retailers. They don't have to ask for it, right? I think that's a really big evaluation point for partners. We're moving away from simply selling software to clients, right? And I think the jig is up, right? Like customers understand that. Clients understand when you're simply just trying to sell them software versus building a relationship and truly trying to solve a problem or drive a business outcome. And that's really what retailers care about. Like if you can show them that light at the end of the tunnel, we'll figure out a way to get there together, right? But like you've got to be able to make it matter to their business, relevant within the ecosystem or the landscape, right? The retail landscape, timely, and something that's actionable, right? Like all those things I think are really, really critical. And if you aren't doing that, I mean, that's often why, and I won't name any names, of course, but that's often why retailers leave certain partners, right? They're like, these people sold me something and then they just like went away. And I want to know what's going on in like the retail tech world because like I don't know, or I want to know, like what they're seeing with their other partners, right? Because that's a great benchmark as well for retailers is, hey, you work with thousands of other people in my space. Tell me what's going on, right? Like do that benchmarking for me because what you have is probably a lot more valuable and, and accurate than anything I could pull, off the internet. This is maybe not new. Maybe it's newer to people that have been kind of maybe in that fraud vacuum, but it's newer in the last few years. It's all about personalization, right? So retailers that can personalize that end consumer experience to a way where it's like they know, and Sephora does this really well, right? Like they know what I bought last time and the date. They can suggest things that are very similar. And they get really granular kind of with that level of personalization. And there's a lot of other really great e-commerce retailers that are doing that very, very well. So I think personalization is a big one, and it has been for a few years. I think it will continue to be, especially in this like age of AI and like knowing your customer. I think that extra layer of intelligence is exciting for retailers, right? That they can use that level of intelligence to get even more precision on like what their customers want at what channels they're shopping through. And related to this really is this concept of digital commerce versus e-commerce, right? So e-commerce is like the method, right? So like that is how you're buying the thing. That's how you're transacting. That's how you're getting your airplane ticket. But digital commerce is kind of like the umbrella around that, right? And digital commerce encompasses this idea of like personalization and like the strategy behind getting really bespoke with certain cohorts, and that, kind of getting slicing and dicing all the way down, all the different kind of, matrices that you can see, like whether it's regionality, whether it's seasonality, whether it's, demographics, right? Like ages 35 to 45, whatever. But so the concept of digital commerce, I think is even more critical for retailers, because that is how they meet their customers where they're at. I'm only shopping Sephora on TikTok, and they know that. That's where they should be putting their investment for me as maybe one of their VIP members, right? Or if I'm only shopping on my laptop on like a web browser, great. Like, don't be showing things to me like on, like my mobile app or whatever. I think that's really where a lot of retailers are putting their investment, is not just the transactional piece, which is the e-commerce layer, but that digital kind of, commerce layer, which is that whole experience, all channels, right? I think the third thing, and this is, so I'm kind of building on this, the other kind of piece, and this is more back of house. So we're talking what the customer experience is and that personalized kind of layer. But internally, operationally, retailers have a big challenge operationally. Pre-e-commerce, when it was brick and mortar, there's always been challenges with, fulfillment and allocation and getting things from point A to point B. Retailers still have that issue today. The added complexity is this e-commerce layer, right? Which is another channel of business. And the fact that the way that e-commerce kind of has developed over the years has been as a separate entity, right? It's kind of its own business, and then brick and mortar stores are its own business, and then wholesale might be another business, right? Now there's this concept of unified commerce from an operational perspective. So we've got like digital commerce, which is the experience and the personalization and the front of house kind of like, end consumer experience. But internally, like systems aren't talking to each other still, right? And which you kind of think like, oh, it's, like retail's been around forever and e-commerce has been around now for a while. It's still a challenge. And I don't know that there's anybody doing it perfectly today, although I think the best retailers that are kind of the first movers are already thinking about this in the last couple of years, which is this idea of unified commerce. And that means not just digital endless aisle, but that means all systems talking to each other real time internally, so that you don't have an issue where inventory is stuck at one place, but the e-commerce, like your website says one thing, or your ERP is truing up the books at the end of the night and you still haven't processed, all your point of sale orders, right? Which is a real problem today. So unified commerce, the idea is that everything's in just one bucket of data, right? So it's not just store data and e-commerce data and wholesale data. It's all together, all sales, all inventory, operationally, so that, again, you can move even faster and meet your customers where they are and transact where they want to transact, but do it in real time, right? And so that is very exciting to me as a former merchant. But again, it's baby steps, right? I don't think anyone's doing this very well today, but the concept is absolutely out there. So it'll be interesting to watch. This is like the Super Bowl for retailers, right? They always say that. They're like, this is our Super Bowl. And while it's stressful, I think for some, it is really exciting for retailers. This is like what they live for, right? As a merchant, it's super exciting to crush your sales goals and get your customers excited and like sell out of your product and not have to buy that again or whatever, right? And so I think, and this is more of a soft, kind of piece of advice, but like, remember that it's really exciting. It's really fun to be a merchant during the holidays. I think it is. As much as it is stressful, it is super fun. But I think the key, and this is where I think again, the best in class retailers will figure out how to layer in AI here, is working very quickly to start to synthesize what is happening week over week, not just like month over month during the holidays, but every single week, what's happening, every single day even, using AI or using whatever kind of intelligence tools that you might have to synthesize things like your sell through and your customer feedback and your inbound customer service calls. And like those themes are things that, frankly, in the past has taken up a lot of time post holiday for retailers to like get all that information together, get the data together, do all the reporting. And so I think the best retailers will get ahead of that and start to just do that real time as the weeks go by. And I do think it's really critical too to use that that kind of read and react, muscle in season, meaning like as the holidays are happening, right? You see one thing from week to week. Maybe then you go and you actually pivot some of your marketing and promotional strategy because you saw something totally different you didn't expect to happen the week before. And this doesn't have to be just around Black Friday, right? This is for the next 90 days, call it, really reading, reacting. And I think those customers or those retailers that can be agile in that sense and get the data as quickly as, and that's really where that heavy lifting, that AI can help with that heavy lifting of synthesizing information, getting it back to the teams that matter, and then actually actioning on that, right? Like doing something, whether it's an assortment strategy, whether it's a promo or a markdown, whether it's going really heavy into social media, whatever that is, but like getting that data ASAP and reacting to it. I think if I were still in seat, that would be absolutely the thing I'd be figuring out is like, how do we just move as quick as possible and eke out kind of like all the opportunities we can for the season.